How does it feel to stand among heroes, to see them, praise them, even reach out and touch them? What makes Team Dragon Force more than champions? Why do kingdoms rejoice at their arrival? And in this celebration of unity, power, and destiny, what does it mean to witness these gods among men? Find out that and more here with me, Quentin, on Free Your Mind. Coming up. Okay, ladies and gents, if you have a copy of the book, let's turn to page 15. We are continuing from the last reading where the king and queen of Avian were introduced. All right, are you ready? The welcoming of the king and queen was not as exciting as that of Team Dragon Force. Unbothered, they just joined their son at the podium, both waving to the people in attendance. Tybalt peeked over at them both, hiding his smile. He felt he had the best family in the world. He saw his father sneak a peek at him too. His father and mother had known who he was from the beginning. The Lady Dragon made sure of that. To our sons, Prince Casey and Prince Daniel, your mother and I are so proud of the men you have become. King Robert embraced Casey in a one-armed hug. Daniel, I hope you can hear your old man speaking. I know you're out there somewhere in the crowd, serving the people. A genuine smile crept across Tybalt's face. This was unable to be hidden. The love he felt for them both was so unconditional. Seeing Tybalt's aura pulsing beyond his natural powered glow in response triggered Komodo to elbow him. This made the bronzed hero regain his composure as the king continued his speech. Gwen and I love you both. This, however, is not about our love for you guys, nor your love for us. King Robert confidently swaggered about. Today we celebrate spreading love and appreciation across Enosh, starting right here in the Silver City. Everyone jumped and cheered. The six applauded King Robert and Queen Gwen, now comfortably on the arm of her husband. She tapered his strut as they both waved to the massive crowd before them. The royals turned, facing the honored heroes, and bowed, curtsied. Gwen leaned into him, whispering in his ear. He acknowledged her words as she released his arm and diminished from his spotlight. Tybalt, Komodo, Scorpio, Leochita, Diesel, and Mastretic, our gods stand before you as a representation of our great kingdoms. In actuality, they are more than just a representation of each of our great kingdoms. As acolytes of the heavens, the six represent our commitment to the continued freedom of Enosh. The Avian King stopped and stepped back. He pressed his hands together, simulating praise. The Avian King then mimicked the crowd's adulation of their gods. People in the crowds were losing it, crying and passing out from overexcitement. Gwen smiled, tickled at her husband. Even asking him to tone down his theatrics, she knew he couldn't. She put her hand on his back to remind him not to go too overboard. He glanced over at her, providing a wink and a grin. After a brief moment of dialogue with Gwen, he raised his hand to pause the crowd, once again approaching the podium. Keeping with tradition, the six will also be touring our other 5 glorious kingdoms to christen and kick off their freedom festivals. Now, to christen this freedom festival, I present to you Team Dragon Force. The crowd's continued cheers and applause echoed as the heroes moved up into the air. The six formed a circle around the Dragon King's ivory statue. Their eyes gleamed, as did the gemstones upon their chests, which pulsed rhythmically. Waves of colorful energy rippled across their bodies. Oh, here goes nothing. T-Bolt exhaled slowly, releasing his anxiety. He glanced at each of the others, praying his jitters would pass. Still, to this day, thinking of Connor's sacrifice and having to fill those shoes caused him stress. Being the team leader that he was, he ignored his feelings of butterflies and started the others off. He knew this was not about him or his team. It was about giving honor to avian royalty, his father, mother, and brother. It was about giving honor to the heavens, the Dragon King, and the White Dragon, and the first that came before them. To thee, Holy Trinity, we do pray. The other 5 dragon gods repeated their leader's prayer. To thee, Holy Trinity, we do pray. 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 The crowd stared up in wonder at the newly created rainbow. 6 glorious beams of colorful energy entangled together, bathing the Dragon King statue in heavenly light before distributing to the other 6. All 7 statues began to glow as if the first themselves had come to life, and then, boom! An explosion banged out above the Dragon King statue. The people closest to the statue jumped from the sound as eruptions of color zoomed around in every direction like shooting stars in the sky. The masses erupted magnificently with cheers of praise as Team Dragon Force descended back to the platform, moving toward the applauding royal family. Casey eyed T-Bolt closely as he and the rest of his godly brothers landed. Your Majesties, the Golden God greeted the royals as each of the 6 bowed to the king and queen, one after the other. Thank you for putting on such a wonderful spectacle. Well, T-Bolt, our sons did a lot, Queen Gwyneth replied, sharing a deceptive smirk. The boys ensured the committee stayed on top of the planning and setup. We accept your thanks on their behalf. Still, we honestly couldn't do it without you. Thank you, my queen, for those kind words. We wanted to come and say an official hello for the evening before beginning. Casey scoffed at his brother's words, rolling his eyes as the Golden One smiled at their parents. Now, if you'll excuse us, the crowd awaits. T-Bolt gave Robert and Gwen a wink as he began to rise from the platform. The conundrum of dual identities was that Daniel had to eventually show up. The prince had to be seen for a while to satisfy the need for certain royal duties to be fulfilled. He knew T-Bolt would need to come back at some point for the festival's evening portion. Suddenly, he heard a voice in his head that was not his, a voice in a foreign tongue he did not understand. The Lady Dragon. He smirked at the thought, turning and looking for her. He immediately spotted the Queen Mother headed his way. It was the green dress she wore, glittering in the light of the day, which gave her away. She walked so elegantly up the steps, she seemed to almost glide up them. T-Bolt thought twice about it. The chances of the Lady Dragon actually gliding up the steps were a high possibility. Her daughter, Princess Angelique, walked a step behind her. The princess was draped uncomfortably in a green and white marbled gown. He was sure her mother had this custom made. Angelique was not one to dress up. T-Bolt briefly scanned the crowd. He knew the Queen Mother's right hand couldn't be far behind. Admiral Lipscomb was the head of the Kamal military and the Lady Dragon's personal guard. She was good at staying hidden and took her job very seriously. Both mother and daughter continued their walk up the steps. T-Bolt was taken aback by Angelique's breasts as they jiggled more than usual. Her wavy red hair danced around her shoulders with each step. Amazing as she looked, he was amazed the princess could breathe. If her breasts had been pushed up any higher, she would have choked. She looked up at Tybalt, smiling at him through her discomfort. He felt a flash of desire at the sight of her moist, pouty lips. As if on instinct, he floated down and met them both on their way up. The hero's feet gently met the platform, and he grabbed the Lady Dragon's hand. The bronze god bowed and kissed it respectfully. He slyly eyed Angelique, who looked annoyed that her mother was getting all of this attention. The Queen Mother draped her arm over his, allowing him to escort her up the remaining steps. Angelique deemed herself more of a warrior than a princess. She knew her stern demeanor intimidated others, both women and men alike, but they still respected her. When Tybalt came around, though, all that went out the window, and she was putty in his hands. Angelique blushed as their eyes locked, but for a moment. To her, it felt like it lasted forever. She sighed, pulling at her uncomfortably tight-fitting dress as his gaze broke away from their connection. Tybalt had refocused on the Kamal Queen instead. If it weren't for the behest of her mother, Angelique would have dressed as she always did for any other occasion. Welcome, your highnesses. It is a great pleasure to see you both. Tybalt spoke eloquently to the Queen Mother, his cape gently flowing behind him. He guided Queen Ariana to where his parents and his teammates communed. Knowing Tybalt longed for the company of her daughter, Ariana released him. She greeted her other colorful boys, then Prince Casey, before making a beeline for his mother, Gwen. Another beautiful celebration, Gwen, she complimented her best friend, bowing to her. She cut her eyes to the man next to her. She still, to this day, couldn't believe she chose to call him husband. Robert, the Queen Mother said his name sourly, but bowed to him nonetheless. He raised an eyebrow that accompanied his infernal smirk, returning the gesture. Queen Mother, I do think that Kamal will surpass you in spectacle this year, she bragged, looking around the crowd below for Admiral Lipscomb. Angelique and the Admiral have both assured me of some pretty wonderful things to come. Robert snarled, knowing Ariana's lackey was tucked away somewhere close by. The Admiral usually forewent her military uniform so as to blend in with against the avian crowd. She and her sleeper agents were mixed in well with the sea of people, hidden from everyone, a practice that was quite commonplace with her. All right, folks, we're going to end there on page 20. We're going to pick back up on page 21 and begin again in episode 4. But now it's time for the Author's Corner. All right, here we are. Author's Corner. Got some questions here we're going to go over. Now, the last ones I felt were a little difficult. Made me think too hard, which is not a bad thing. But, these are a little more, I think, interesting. So let's go through them. All right, question number 1. They're very thought-provoking. Question number 1. What emotions would you feel standing before Team Dragon Force as they descend onto the platform? Man, I've thought about this before. I think if I was in the crowd and I could see something that spectacular descending from the sky, I'm picturing it right now while I'm talking to you. I think my heart would be full of emotion. I would probably be teary-eyed because that kind of thing would evoke emotion in me. I would be extremely overwhelmed emotionally. How about you? Imagine, you don't really probably know these heroes well, but think of it like if you saw Superman or whoever your hero is, that you like, you know, Batman. What if you saw Batman, if you're in Gotham, you look up and, ooh, there he goes across the sky, and like the Frank Miller comic where he's like right there, lightning flashes and there's his silhouette, what kind of emotion would that evoke? All right, question number 2. Prince Casey introduces the team. How do you think his leadership style compares to Prince Daniel's? I don't think that's a question that has an answer because you don't know Prince Daniel yet, right? All you know is T-Bolt. I think that question will be answered as far as the difference in their personalities, but not their leadership style. I think this speaks for itself for Casey. The fact that he's the one that's doing this. He has that presence. Plus, Daniel's occupied. As T-Bolt, so you really can't have him doing anything. Anyways, that answers that question. All right, third question. The Silver Palace stands as a symbol of power and tradition. How do architecture and setting shape the atmosphere of a story? Well, I can't talk about any story, but this one specifically, the fact that if you go back and look at the last video, I talk about the castle as kind of like um, an icon or whatever, a symbol of everything. You can even see it from parts in a whole nother city. Here where I'm at, we have something similar. We have Liberty Mountain, and you can see that bad boy from pretty much anywhere in the city. So, that's the same kind of mindset. That castle is so massive. In the book, I draw it at the end of the book, and it really doesn't do it justice compared to what's in my head. But think of it on a bigger scale. That's on top of a hill, right, where everybody can see it. It's a focal point visually. It's a huge thing, and it's a prominent attachment to Avian and to the story. So at least the first part of the story, anyway. All right, next question. T-Bolt's moment of uncertainty before the ceremony. Why do you think personal doubts often coexist with greatness? I don't really think personal doubt is the thing with people who are great, really, except for maybe doubt in decisions. But let's T-Bolt specifically. He is filling the shoes of Connor. Connor is the first one to ever have that power. His Team Dragon Force name is Abraxas. So Abraxas was the leader of Team Dragon Force, right? So he pretty much took over for Connor in that effect. And you find out more about that as the story goes on. I think that's the next book. Maybe not. I can't remember where I reveal it at, but you need to stay tuned to find that out, folks. So, but yeah, that's really why he's feeling that way, because it's like, can I live up to the legacy more than anything else? All right, question number 5. The 6 beams of energy forming a rainbow. How does color and spectacle enhance the impact of storytelling? Excuse me. So for this video specifically, or this reading that we did specifically, a lot of the colors and stuff are a way of showing the representation of each of them, and those colors are attached to their power as well. And you'll see a lot of that as we read more of the book. All right. The Lady Dragon and T-Bolt's interaction. What makes personal relationships important, even in grand moments of history? Well, the Lady Dragon is very prominent because she is the Queen Mother. She is kind of like the Queen of England, right? She was the figurehead, right, of England. She may not have been the one that ran anything, but she was the figurehead, kind of like a president or a prime minister in a country. They're like that figurehead of that, and that's what she is. Even though there's six kingdoms that have their own king and queen or whatever, she's like the one above them. She would be the representation of the seventh, you know, or really the first kingdom, right? Because the very first kingdom is Enosh, right? And she's a representation, a representation of Enosh holistically, right? And then the other six kingdoms kind of surround Enosh, which is in the center, right? Which is where Donovan was. That was his kingdom. That's where he ruled. So that seventh kingdom, which is like a holy spot, a holy place, the other ones are kind of like the surrounding of that. And she's the figurehead of everything, even though she has her own kingdom of Kamal that she represents. Holistically, she represents Enosh as a whole. And they know that and really look up to her for that. For that reason, she is kind of much the head of everything in a sense. So, but yeah, that's pretty much everything. All six questions. I hope you found that interesting. Feel free to comment, ask questions about what we've covered. I hope you go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more coming next week. We're going to finish up chapter 1 before we move on to the next chapter. All right, so stay tuned. And if you haven't gotten the book yet, go ahead and do that so you can really read along with us, okay? All right, so that's going to be everything. Thank you for tuning in to Free Your Mind. I'm your host, Quinn 10. That's Quinn, the number 10, or 10 if you're Spanish. But anyways, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.